a land where dust ruled the roads and silence spoke louder than words, Jack Carter rode alone. Beneath a sky that never seemed to end, he was a man carved by loss and sharpened by survival, known across the county as someone who fixed problems without asking questions. He was the kind of man towns remembered but never truly knew. On one late afternoon, as the sun bled orange into the horizon, his path crossed with destiny in a way no bullet ever had. Standing near a broken wagon at the edge of the road was a woman with fire in her eyes and fear in her hands. She did not beg, did not cry, but stood like someone who had already decided she would survive, no matter the cost. Jack almost rode past her. He almost chose the easier road of loneliness again, a path worn smooth by years of solitude. But then he saw the child, a small figure hiding behind her skirts, and he noticed the way her shoulders trembled despite her fierce posture. That was the moment his past caught up with him, a ghost he'd been outrunning for years. Because once, long ago, someone had ridden past when his family needed help, and Jack had sworn an oath to his younger self that he would never become that man. So he stooped and dismounted, his boots sinking into the thick dust. He offered water, then silence, and finally, protection. The woman, whose name was Grace, did not trust. His years on the run had taught her that kindness often came with a price she couldn't afford. But desperation teaches fast lessons. She watched him, her gaze sharp and calculating, as he fixed the broken wheel with steady, capable hands. His eyes never wandered, never judged. His presence was a quiet promise of safety. With a weary nod, she climbed back onto the wagon. Her child held close, and their journey together began. As they traveled toward the town shimmering in the heat haze ahead, stories began to surface in fragments, shared in the quiet moments between the creak of the wagon wheels and the whisper of the wind. Grace was running from powerful men who wanted what she owned and wouldn't stop until they had it. Jaggy was running too, but from something inside himself, a past soaked in blood and regret. The land itself seemed to test them. The nights froze their breath in the air, and the days burned their skin under a relentless sun. Each mile was a battle against the elements and their own exhaustion, but a more immediate danger followed closer than their own shadows. The men hunting Grace were not the kind to forgive or forget. Their pursuit was relentless, their reputation a dark cloud that preceded them. The inevitable confrontation found them just outside a narrow, unforgiving canyon. The first crack of a rifle shattered the afternoon quiet. Bullets kicked up dust around the wagon, splintering wood and shredding the fragile peace they had found. In that moment, Jack did what he did best. He became the man the legends whispered about. He stood alone against many, his revolver a blur of motion and sound. He wasn't fighting to be a hero. He had given up on that notion long ago. He was fighting because walking away was no longer an option. He was fighting for the woman and child who had, against all his intentions, found a crack in the armor around his heart. And Grace saw then what kind of man he truly was. Not fearless, but resolved. Not cruel, but controlled. Every movement was precise, economical, born of a life lived on the edge. When the smoke finally cleared and the deafening silence returned, the road ahead had changed. Survival had tied them together in ways words could not undo. They were no longer just two strangers sharing a path. They were bound by the shared breath of a fight for life. When they finally reached the town, they found that trouble was on just a shadow on the trail. It was woven into the very fabric of the community. Corruption festered behind the sheriff's star. The lawmen served money instead of justice, their loyalty for sale to the highest bidder. The same men who hunted Grace now owned this town, lock, stock, and barrel. Jack realized that running again would only delay the inevitable. For Grace, for the child, the running had to stop here. So he made a choice he had avoided his entire life. He decided to stand his ground, not just against the men in front of him, but against the ghosts that haunted him from behind. It was time to face the past he had been running from. High noon arrived with a heavy stillness. The dusty main street was empty. Windows shuttered, doors barred. The wind carried whispers of fear and anticipation. Jack stood alone, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a town holding its breath. For a moment, it seemed history would repeat itself. One man, abandoned by many, facing impossible odds. But this time was different. From the shadows of a nearby alley, Grace stepped forward. She held no weapon, offered no battle cry, but her presence was a defiant act of loyalty. Then, another figure appeared. An old shopkeeper Jack had helped with a stuck wagon wheel days earlier. Then a farmer whose fence he'd mended without asking for payment. One by one, people emerged, lives he had touched simply by doing the right thing, by offering a small kindness when it would have been easier to ride on. The final confrontation wasn't loud or glorious like the stories in dime novels. It was quiet, heavy, and permanent. When it was over, justice had been served, not with a thunderous roar, but with a solemn finality. Jack Carter, the man who believed he was destined to die alone, found himself standing in the bright sunlight with a future he never planned for. He looked at Grace, who saw him not as a legend or a weapon, but as a man. He saw the child, whose laughter now echoed without fear in the quiet street. The cycle of running was broken, as days turned into weeks, and the harsh land softened under new seasons. Jack learned a profound truth. Redemption wasn't earned in one spectacular moment of courage. It was built slowly, quietly, through the simple act of staying. It was built by choosing people over pain, connection over solitude. One evening, as they watched the stars blanket the endless sky, Grace finally asked him the question that had lingered between them since that first day. "Why did you stop?" On the road, Jack looked at her, the firelight dancing in his eyes, and answered with a simple, unvarnished truth. "I was tired," he said, his voice low and steady. "Tired of riding past my own soul, under an American sky that stretched wide with possibility. They built something simple and real. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a true Wanda, kind-written not by fate alone, but by choice, by sacrifice, and by the courage to stand when it matters most." If you felt this story, don't ride past the next one. Subscribe to Wild Tales Storytelling, like the video, and comment where you're watching from, because the next cinematic American story is already waiting.